It's Sandy Parker and welcome to Crafting for Almost Everyone. Today we're going to do a technique I call, well, Jennifer McGuire calls ink layering, and I thought we would play with it a little bit. And what I do normally is I make a mock-up of it and play with it and figure out what I need to do differently, and that's what I've done here. And what I realized from doing this is I need to make some masks and I need to work on my colors. So we'll start first with the colors that we're going to be using, and that would be, we're going to use the Pigment ink on the bottom. It's a white pigment ink by Hero Arts called Unicorn White. And we're going to want to make sure that we use a big enough background stamp to cover our 5.5 by 4 inch piece of white, whoops, threw that away, white 110 pound cardstock. It doesn't need to be that thick of cardstock, but that's what I usually have in white, so I just use what I have. It's either that or copy paper, and you know, we're not going to use copy paper for it. Well, or watercolor paper. So anyway, we want to make sure we really get this white. You know, if it's a little bit gray looking, keep stamping. You want to make sure it's really, really white. Then you're going to take your white paper and you're going to line it up as best you can so that it's even on the sides before you drop it down. Then you're going to hold it in place, and I always use a piece of scrap paper and put over it and rub it really, really well, because we want our ink to really transfer from the stamp to the white paper, and it's really hard to tell when it's white on white until we do the next step whether or not it works. So we're going to really push on this hard. Okay, I think that's probably good. And then you're going to very gently, gently as I can be, lift it off and flip it over. Then we're going to clean this stamp off, but I'm going to do that a little bit later. And make sure you do clean it off, because that white pigment ink gets a little bit sticky in there. Then I'm going to dry this, because pigment ink doesn't really dry easily, so you want to dry it with your heat tool, and I heat mine up a little bit before I apply it to the paper. And you're just going to dry it enough that it doesn't smear around when we do the next technique. That ought to do it. And I'm just going to touch the corner and see if you get the white off. It's probably not as dry as you want it to be, so you want to make sure that that it's dried. But we're not going to be doing anything for a couple minutes on it, so it does have a little bit more time to dry. I want to show you some other things along the way. Something else that I'm going to be doing is I'm using my MISTI. Well, you can't use a MISTI with a wooden block tool or stamp, so I'm going to show you how to remove the stamp from the block. All you're going to do is take something that's flat, like it could be a spatula that you use, but you want it to be a flat item, and you're going to put it underneath the foam. And I'm going to turn this so you can see it. Do you see how it's under the foam? And you're going to just want to wiggle it around so that you loosen up that foam. Sometimes you can actually just pull it off with your hands, but I've had trouble where I've actually ripped the foam, and you don't want to do that. That foam is kind of fragile, especially if your stamp is a little bit older. I have a lot of it off. Let's see how much of it is off, and if I can kind of gently pull the rest of it off. If you've never done this, if I can do it, believe me, anybody can do it. So it's almost off. I just don't want to ruin that rubber. Okay, there you go. So now you can just use that in your MISTI. Yes, it will leave some sticky stuff in your MISTI, but that's why you have that Novus cleaner, so you can clean your MISTI. And I've done that with a couple of other ones. I have this one, and I used one from Stampin' Up from a set called, I think it's called, Perfect Plaid, and this is the piece that I took off the wood piece, and I also did another longer piece, and we're going to be using all these, so it's important that I know where they're at. Anyway, let me tell you one other thing we're going to need. When you do this process, you're going to wipe the surface after you've got the ink on it, and I didn't want it to smear around like this did, so what I did is I created a mask so that what you can do is you can wipe it without having a problem with it smearing around the spot. And I'll show you how I did that, because I have one of my friends on YouTube has asked me to show you how to do a mask, and this is like a reverse mask, and I still want to show you how to do it. Oh, and there's that last one we're looking for, that last stamp. So here's how you work when you're going to, sorry, I'm a little distracted because I think I have a magnet that's run awry. When you want to make a mask, what you're going to do is you're going to put your Post-it note paper. In this case, you're not going to have the advantage of the Post-it note sticky part where you want it. It doesn't really matter. All we're going to do is we're going to lay this in our MISTI, and if it doesn't stick, all I do is I put a little bit of tape runner on the back of it. And again, not a lot, but just enough that it'll stick. And now it sticks. And you're going to put your MISTI down, and I'm going to just ink it up with whatever ink I have on hand. This isn't, the ink isn't the important part. The important part is that you have a really good impression of the stamp so that you can cut it. And you want to make sure, again, that you rub it so you can see it. And I like to do the next part with my demon stick, if you know what that means. For me, it's my X-Acto knife. And the reason I call it that is that when I was in college, one of my girlfriends was an art major, and in her first semester of school, cut her thumb with her X-Acto knife all the way to the bone. And so ever since then, I've kind of renamed it, because I had to take her to the hospital, and I'm not that great with blood either. It wasn't a moment I wanted to save her. Okay, so what we're doing is we're doing a reverse mask. Now, normally the important part of the mask is the inside part of it, but we will keep that. But in this case, the important part of our mask is going to be the outside of it. So you're going to take your X-Acto knife or demon stick and just make a little X in the center of your paper, because you want to be able to use your scissors in there, and it's the easiest way to get access to that spot. So, yeah, of course I didn't push hard enough. Anyway, here's how you do it. You're going to go to the edge, but not all the way to the outside edge, because when you make a mask, you want to be able to have a little bit of the stamp-ish image so that it acts as a barrier on the very edge. So we're just going to really close to the edge. You're just going to cut that out as close as possible, but still leaving a little bit of stamp behind. And I hope that makes some decent sense. I'm trying to keep my fingers out of there so that you can see the mask. So this is how our mask should look. It's a little bit smaller than your stamp, and so then when you put this over it, it covers up the area around it and allows you to do whatever you want to do to this portion. And in the reverse, if you want to make it so that this stamped image is no longer visible, you use your inside mask. So both are used for different purposes, but they're both very handy. Let me tell you about the stamps I'm using. These are from Hero Arts, the ones that I've taken off of their wooden blocks, and they're called this one's called Little Greeting Background, this one is just called Background 4, and the third one, the biggest one, is called Shadow Stamp 3. That's this one. And I think I said this is called Little Greeting Background. So those are those. And then the big background stamp we use is from Stampin' Up. It's called a Linograph Linograph? I think it's Linograph. Anyway, so those are the stamps that we're using. Oh, and I already told you we might be using one stamp from Stampin' Up! From the Perfectly Plaid set of stamps. Now that I've got my paper in the MISTI, sorry I had a moment there where I lost track of things and my magnets attached to themselves. I do have one of the bar magnets that Jennifer uses, but I haven't tried it yet because it is very strong and I don't know if I can pull it off even with the washi tape on it, so I'm going to play with that before I do a video with it. I will tell you a couple tricks about the magnets if you have a MISTI or one of the similar stamping products. What I would recommend you doing is putting the washi tape on it, because they sometimes will smack against each other and get stuck together, and if they do, they're hard to pull apart. But I'll show you a couple of tricks that I learned along the way, because this thing has abused me more than I can say. Let's say that two of these did that. What you want to do is you want to put them up to the edge of your MISTI. See how they are right there, and you're just going to slide the top one away, and that will help you. If you get a stack of them together, you're just going to do one at a time and do the same thing I just showed you. But that will happen to you if you have a MISTI. You definitely will have a moment where you say to yourself, geez, oh man, how am I ever going to get those apart? Maybe you won't say that, but for me, there were several times when I was like, this is the end of my life as I know it, because I couldn't get them apart. So here's where we stand at this point, and I'm going to get my mock-up of my card so you can see it. I'm changing the order. I'm putting the thanks up higher and the other box down lower, so it's going to be a little bit reversed, and of course it's not going to look all messy like that one does. So these are the colors we're going to be using. This is Stampin' Up! Pretty in Pink, Stampin' Up! Melon Mambo, Picked Raspberry from Distress Inks, and from My Favorite Things color box, Razzleberry. So those are the four we're going to be using, or maybe only three, I don't know at this point. And I think we're going to start with our lightest color, which is the Pretty in Pink at the top. And right now you can't see that the white underneath. The white is invisible to the naked eye. But once we do this technique, you'll definitely see it. Sorry, I had a little glitter on there I had to get off. As you know, I've got glitter on everything from that last project. Even though I used that Swiffer, that technique did not work for me. I'm telling you, I got glitter everywhere. And I also used the coffee filters, and I think I'm just messy. I'm a messy crafter. There we go. That's the sum total of what I can say about my crafting life. I'm a messy crafter. Refresh your memory. It's this thanks sentiment. Remember I said I was going to move it up here? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave, I think that's about 1.5 inches. I'm pretty sure it is, but I'm going to measure it because, as in all things, you never know. And it is, let's see, it's 1.25 inches. Our next step is going to be the blocks, because we're going back to what we have here. So our next step would be to use the little blocks that we used. And so I'm going to move these up here. That really isn't straight. Oh well. We'll figure something out. And we're going to put one I think I'm going to put my bar in the bottom so I know exactly where I have left for my squares. Doesn't that make sense? All in favor of that? Now's the time to vote. The voting booth is going to be closing in just a minute. Get that out of the way. Back to our pretty in pink. We know now exactly how much space we have left for our blocks, so we ought to be able to center them pretty easily. And I think I'm going to use I made a couple color swatches of these so I would know which ones were darker. And this is the raspberry. It's very pink, and the melon mambo and picked raspberry. So these two are very close together, and so I think I might use the melon mambo in the middle and the raspberry on either side. So these are the ones we're going to be using next. Okay, let's try this instead. We're going to go with the raspberry. I like to do both sides and then the middle last. That way I can make sure that my centerpiece is actually centered. Okay, next step is for us to get one of our masks that we made. We're going to put it on the first one of these and hold it down. That's the other key when you're doing a mask, is making sure that it's as attached to the surface as possible, and making sure that you don't end up having any loose ends, so that it doesn't, smear the ink underneath the mask. Okay, so that's those. Next, all we need to do is our sentiment, and I think I'm going to do that in some Versamark ink, and I'm going to put the sentiment from, it is Paper Smooches, it's bold buzzwords, and it's a big thanks sentiment. So we're going to use that. Boy, it's amazing how much dog hair you can get on things. Especially when you have a little white dog, you can't see the little white dog hairs on anything until it's too late. Too late. Okay, we're going to ink this up with Versamark, which is just a clear kind of glycerin ink, and it stays sticky for a long time, and it makes for a really good base when you're going to use embossing powder, because it really stays wet, so that you can get a lot of that embossing powder to stick to it. Get that down. And looks good, like you can see it. I got some dark ink on it somehow. And I have this pink. It was as I said, it was left over from our project yesterday where I made the Valentine's cards. I'll be glad to link that video right there in the top right. You could just click on that little eye. So I have a little bit of my embossing powder where I don't want it, so I'm just going to take my little paintbrush, go around where I don't want it, and sometimes the other end of the paintbrush works good too, the plastic end. So work with the part that works best for you, but in my case I kind of go from end to end, and like let's say through this section, if you don't like it, like I wiped off some of the end, you could just put that back on, and the embossing powder should stick to the Versamark. Okay, I think it's as clean as I'm going to get it, so let me heat set it and I'll be right back. So now that I have my thanks embossed, I thought I'd make these lines or on either side of it a little bit wider, and that'll take care of some of my boo-boo where I got a little bit of ink where I didn't want it, and it ought to make it so that it'll straighten it, it'll make it look a little bit straighter, hopefully. That's the goal. And if it doesn't, well, we'll keep working on it until we figure out a plan that does. And I'm not exactly sure, it's hard to see. That's the one thing about rubber stamps, is it's hard to see exactly where you are with it, you know, in the grand scheme of things. Are you right on top of the other stripe, or are you a little bit off of the stripe? So I can tell now I'm off of it, but before I couldn't really tell that. So we're going to just keep working at it until we like what we got. That's my plan. Work at it till I like it. So I decided I was going to put my card on this background and then on a 5.5 by 4.25 piece of white cardstock. So that's going to be our background, and then this is going to be obviously the front. But then I decided, you know, if I really wanted to up this ante and make it a little bit more frisky, the way to do it would be to try something completely new for me, and that is using this deco foil. And I've had so many of my viewers say, "Hey Cindy, you said you were going to use deco foil, and it sounds like the lie about the Vagabond that you swear you're going to use." I swear I'm going to use that Vagabond. But anyway, since I've promised forever that I would use this deco foil, today is the day. And I've already laid down a bunch of strips of this tape, and I thought I would run one right through the middle of the word thanks as well. Should be straight. If I can get it to come off there. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so I'm going to rub that down really well on both sides. And obviously the secret to this is, can I take the backing off and still have some sticky stuff on there, and can I still accomplish getting this, I'm going to have to pick it up, I have a little bit on this S, and can I still make sure that the foil stays down? These are the questions we have. I don't know. I don't know the answer to these questions. We're going to know in a minute though. With that being said, cross your fingers. We're going to go with this deco foil that is, it's got a little bit of pink in the background. I'm trying to find, it's called Opal. I was trying to find the name, and that was the name, Opal. So I'm going to take off these top rows all at once and see if I can get them all to work well with each other. If you watch my videos, you know I have a few fiascos. Okay, I'm going to lay this down on here and hope for the best. Okay, I think I'm on the right side. So that when I pull this up, we're going to end up with our whole, everything having that opal image on it. That's my hope. Okay, cross your fingers. I'm going to do this very slowly. Come on, baby. Come on. Come off of there. Come on. Oh, just a little bit of it didn't want to come off. Wow, the top part really came off. No problem. The bottom is still fighting me a little bit. Let's see. Why won't that come off? Come on. Okay, well. So that's that part. It's kind of cool, isn't it? I'm going with it's kind of cool. It's not as horrible as it could be, right? For those of you who know my sense of humor, you know I'm just freaking out right now. That's all. Just freaking out. So it's kind of cool. I don't know if you can see that, but it does look kind of cool, all that glittery back, in between the rows. So let's put this card together. Let's get this bad boy going. I do think I should put it up on some dimension though, because it is kind of flat otherwise. And I'm going to just stick that down. And oh look, I'm just going to snap it off like that. That worked. Don't look. It'll just upset you. You'll be like, what is she doing? Oh, this stuff is just junk. It just has a mind of its own too. It doesn't want to do anything that normal foam tape does. And then let's go for the crazy layer. Making sure I can get that out of the way. Again, same way, I'm going to try and lay it down on the side. Okay, so last but not least, let's put our card together real quickly. I think it came out really, really nicely considering how quickly I was willing to throw in the towel on it and beg for mercy. So I'm relieved that in the end the deco foil was so much fun, and we'll have to play with that way more often because it was a hoot. And if you don't have any of that, you should get some. I found mine on clearance at Michael's a long time ago, and I never used it. In fact, it's so long ago that it was in my tour of my craft room, which is my very first video I made, and somebody, whoever you are that asked me for it, I'm so sorry I forgot. They wanted a video on it, and I completely forgot about it, but that's what it looks like with the opal deco foil on it. It's kind of cool looking. And then I need to put my stamp on the back that says, I made this for you. I have a new one of these that I have coming. There's a company that makes these very inexpensively, and I will link that in the video. I think it was $4.95 to get that one made. And because I had that one made, and I think life should be fun, I believe that you should be a Fruit Loop in a world of Cheerios, and I like to put that on my envelopes, as well as some washi tape that matches. So we'll put some of that around the bottom and make sure that it, I like to make sure it matches. And if it's really thin like this, what I normally do is I normally put 2 rows of it so that it really shows up better. And I got this at the Dollar Tree, I think. They had a bunch of small rolls. You get like 5 small rolls for $1 or something. It was very inexpensive. Anyway, I like the little thin rolls because it's a variation. It gives you a little bit of, shakes things up a little bit. So in the end, I think this card that was one that was maybe going to go in the trash, that was an ink layering technique to begin with the pigment ink underneath and the dye inks on top, and then wiping it so you can see that design. I hope you can see that design. To me thinking that I needed to emboss my sentiment, and then I used the Melon Mambo that had glitter in it, and that didn't make me happy enough, so I added another layer of clear embossing on it to raise it up a little bit more. Then that didn't make me happy enough, so I added the deco foil in opal, and in the end I have to say I'm finally happy with this card, and I hope you are too. And let me know what you think about it in the comments, and please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.